when you live where I live and you see what I see, to see resources doing that, it's just wrong on every single level. And the thing is, I think I'm not the only person or persons who might see this as a definitive sign that Christianity's morality, Christianity's core beliefs has just died by many Christian sects saying, let's rebuild that cathedral. It literally is a sign that Christianity's dying. Sadly, what it's built on the foundation of the morals of that man, Jesus Christ, Yeshua Christ, have been abandoned. And over our neighbour, over culture, over the well-being of children, culture has been chosen. It's a dark day. When you think about it correctly, it's a dark day. And maybe there are some prophets out in the world, who knows? Because I know there was a very unusual video which represented the Antichrist called I Goat 2, I think, can't remember. I'll put the name in and I'll put a clip in from there now, because there's a very unusual scene in there where a steeple falls which looks like the Notre Dame steeple, and it falls on top of a crucifix. And if you hear the words I've just said and they resonate with you and you look at that, then you might be able to say that perhaps there was someone prophetic behind the creation of that cartoon. Maybe that, or someone who set alight to the cathedral made it, which is another discussion for another video, I'm sure.
It all starts to make sense. The itty-bitty economy's based on geography, fueled by spectators and their money and their need for things that will not last.
Hey guys, I want to talk about probably one of the biggest news stories at present, which is the cathedral in Notre Dame. And I do this on Easter, and I think it's an important time of the year. I've made videos about Easter in the past and what this actually means, because the celebration of Easter is lost in translation, and I have videos about the Passover. The word Easter does not exist in the Bible. So it's a strange time that it's Easter and this cathedral has burnt down, and ultimately the most un-Christian behaviour in my eyes is being born off the back of this disaster. Now, I wear this from time to time. It was a gift from my wife, made by a local guy here in Tanzania. And I do so because, not because I say I'm Christian. And here, however, I can easily say I'm Christian. But in the West, I find it very difficult to say I'm Christian. The reason being is there's very few actual Christians in the West. There's just countless people who say they're Christian, but they're not. And we know this, we see this. It's very self-evident that there are a lot of even preachers who are just not Christian. They don't transform themselves, they don't live in those higher qualities of man in service to others and in love above all else. Instead, they just habituate bad behaviours and then go on a Sunday and ask for forgiveness and go back and do it again. And that is actually the word that was mistranslated. Malakos, that behaviour is a mistranslation to the word homosexual in the modern day Bible. So most of those people are literally pointed at in a negative way by the text because of the way they live. They don't have the strength, they don't have the courage, they don't have the stamina to put behind them the behaviours that stop them from functioning. They can't get over the impulses of their flesh, and thus they are not Christian, but they label themselves as Christian. Now, what I mean by this, I've met countless pastors, just to clarify that, I've met countless pastors who testify Jesus is the Son of God, but they still go out and abuse people, or they still go out and, I know an English pastor here who was sleeping with young girls and thankfully doesn't come back to the country anymore. Young girls in poverty, you know, who look to him as a figure of stability and trust, and he has sex with them. He's an English guy. So he professes Jesus as the Lord and Saviour, but it means diddly squat. It means jack shit. It means nothing whatsoever when your words do that, but your heart does nothing to transform itself. It means absolutely nothing. It's just people playing a game of trying to feel safe because they worry there might be damnation if they don't say it. But they still can't be a man. They still have to go out and abuse young girls. It's pathetic. So this is a huge problem for me back in the West, and here as well. But here there are a lot more Christians, I find. Literally as well. There are more people here who are people of faith in Tanzania and East Africa than there are back in Europe these days. And I see true Christians here who do put love first, who do put service to others before all else. And that makes me comfortable with Christianity here. I'm drawn, in fact, to persons who actually are Christian in their energy, in their nature. And I know when I meet someone how I feel with them here, whether or not they're truly a Christian or whether they're someone who says they're a Christian. So this behavior can be reflected, this problematic thing with behavior can be reflected to what's going on at Notre Dame. The cathedral has fallen in fire. It's a tragic fire. It's terrible that it happened. All that history, all that culture just gone. You know, all the artifacts, etc. just gone. But the problem I've got is now there's more than $1 billion being raised to resurrect this cathedral. Now I understand it's a national treasure. I really do understand that. I understand people don't want to let go of the past. But as events would have it, let go they should, because it's over, it's down, it's fell. And what you're going to rebuild is a modern fabrication, a copy. It's not the original. You know, the original has 800 years of history. This fabrication will not. It just won't. So you're not going to get it back, is the next thing with that $1 billion plus that they've got. They're not going to get the Notre Dame Cathedral back. But the problem I have here is, where could that money actually be used? Because if you look at that cathedral and its history, it was part of the Inquisition, where the Roman Catholic Church, who ultimately were satanic at the time and still behave in satanic manners at the present time. I'm not saying if you're Roman Catholic you're satanic, but the institution behaves contradictory to Christ. The institution behaves as an antichrist very often. Now, they killed tens of millions of people in horrendous ways. And Notre Dame Cathedral witnessed this and the persons within it. Now, of course, at the same time, it brought great solace and hope to people as well. So it's not just purely a negative structure, it's not a negative piece of architecture, but it is part of it. Now, that shows you something, that the church once over was definitely influenced by a negative satanic way. Burning people alive, etc. It can only be deemed satanic in the language of that sphere of using language. I would say that anything opposed to what Christ taught is antichrist, and thus there's actually an argument to say that perhaps the resurrection of the Notre Dame Cathedral at the price of over $1 billion is a little bit antichrist. Because didn't Yeshua say, a man who has 2 tunics, give one to the poor? Quite simple message. Share. Now, if you are sitting on big piles of money, billions of dollars, and children are starving, then where the hell are we going with our planet and our society? You're making a decision. You're valuing culture. You're valuing heritage over the life of children. Now, it's not direct. It's not like in the square at Notre Dame Cathedral people are starving, but they are starving. And the way the world is connected now, those people donating know it. There's no way they don't know it. But they choose to see it not as their problem, but they see the collapse of a building as their problem. Resurrecting that building does nothing for the suffering many on this planet, and it does nothing to follow the teachings of Yeshua. I work damn hard to get fractions of over $1 billion to be able to run what we're running here. Very small fractions as well. And isn't it self-evident that the people who have the money seem to be so shut off from reality that they can give tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to rebuild something, but they can leave children laboring, they can leave children suffering, they can leave children dying with inadequate medical care, they can leave children uneducated. They choose to resurrect a building rather than give those children an opportunity. Whether they do it consciously or unconsciously is another discussion. But in the world that we live in, somewhere deep in their subconscious, they know fine well, if they've got that level of money to resurrect that thing, that they have chosen to ignore the needs of people, which is contrary to Christianity. Now, I know a lot of people donating are doing so out of historical interest and out of restoration of this new and fake cathedral that they're going to build. And that's okay, I can understand having some want to hang on to the past, but it's delusional. You know, the past has gone, and it is delusional. It should go into the history books. And right now, if the church had any substance whatsoever, anything close to what pro-Christ is, then the church would say and speak up, that $1 billion should not rebuild a giant building that's going to cost endless money to stay and to keep standing, because it costs a lot of money. The cathedral near where I'm from in England costs £50,000 a week. So anti-Christ, it's unbelievable. £50,000 a week to keep it standing whilst children suffer, whilst people in that same city are massively addicted to drugs, etc. And there's nowhere for them to go. There's nowhere for the youth to go who are getting arrested. There's nowhere for the friends of mine who died choking on their vomit because they had alcohol problems when they were teens, but they still managed to raise £200,000 a month to keep a building standing that has very little significance in the lives of the city folk who dwell there. This is the problem with organised Christianity. Now, in the background, you can hear a church singing where I am. That's the only benefit of having a house of worship. But does a house of worship have a need to be so big and extravagant that it costs over $1 billion? No, because they are still praying to God in a very cheap structure, here where I am in Tanzania, and they are doing so with more purity and more Christ-like nature than any of those people who are throwing millions of dollars at a fallen cathedral instead of at the children who suffer on this planet every single day. Now, you can say that's my personal view and opinion, but I'm going to say and hazard a guess it would be exactly similar words to that of Yeshua, because he said it. If you have 2 tunics, give one to the poor. He said it. Now, for those who are religious and say, but this is a house of God, it should be resurrected. Again, you're contrary to the belief system. You're contrary to what your religion is built of. For God does not dwell in temples made with hands, to quote the Bible. And the only other temple you've got is right here. God is an internal thing. And if you want to find God, close the door behind you and pray in secret in private. What that's referring to is meditation, in fact, and going into your upper chamber, your inner chamber, which is the thalamus of your brain. It's changing the way you perceive things. It's being the person who can choose not to react to the impulses of the flesh, not to react to the feelings that come up inside them that shouldn't be coming up, that shouldn't be acted upon, that do come up inside them, lust, etc. That's where God dwells when you get to that place within inside your brain. It doesn't dwell in a church, it doesn't dwell in a cathedral. The Bible tells you that. It tells you. And that's why Yeshua later says he'll bring down this temple and rebuild it in 3 days. The temple is the body. You dry fast for 3 days, you water fast for 3 days, you reset your immune system, as modern science shows you. But the temples are built in silence, where God does dwell. And temples made of brick in the Bible are man-made, unnatural. Temples made of stone are natural. But if they go ahead and spend over $1 billion, what does it send a message? First of all, to the poor persons of France. What message do they get from that? They are, for a long time, the Yellow Vests are pushing hard against what has become a very monolithic system of taxes which are not fair on those who are in poverty. Then all those persons in poverty see $1 billion spent on rebuilding something that's fell down in a fire. What effect does it have on them subconsciously? It's a massive, massive kick in the teeth for people. And at the same time, it shows people where the value is placed inside the persons who have the wealth. And it actually creates more discourse, I believe, in the impoverished, because it creates discourse in me to hear that they're doing it. I'm sure it's creating more discourse in the Yellow Vests as well. Whether it's a cultural love or not, It's down, it's over, it's gone. To rebuild it is to fantasize about getting something back. And it's not coming back. You'll never get back what it was. And as I say, if you're religious, God doesn't dwell in that house. God dwells in the people that enter inside that house. That is not a house of God any more than it's the house of Quasimodo. And the Bible tells you, God dwells in temples not made with hands, made in silence. So, this whole situation, for those who are religiously motivated by what they're doing, building this cathedral, is Antichrist. And sadly, they're not actually probably consciously choosing to be Antichrist, but it is Antichrist. It's against what Yeshua taught. It's against what Christ taught. Christ taught us to share. He taught us to value human life and your neighbour above all else. He taught us that. And this cathedral is just a clear message into the consciousness of everybody in the developed and undeveloped world. We value our cultural heritage over the children and women and men who starve and suffer and die slowly from sicknesses, etc. in other cultures. It's an advertisement to say we are no longer a Christian nation. It's an advertisement to say we are a nation who's completely lost our way. To choose to use resources whilst people suffer as they do in this very instant on this planet, to protect your culture and not those people, means humanity has gone completely in the wrong direction. And God help us. God help us to get back on track. Because if someone with any sense was in charge, if someone with any heart was in charge, they would stand up in front of everyone and say, it's a heartbreaking situation, truly, that this has fell down and we've lost one of our icons that stood for 800 years. But for the next 3 months, we're going to show you where we're spending that $1 billion, not building the cathedral, but we're going to show you the lives it changes. We're going to show you the children who are waking up smiling, happy for school, instead of miserable going into the quarry to dig. We're going to give people the medical care they require. We're going to put money into research so as we can end the suffering of people suffering with long-term diseases. We're going to bring clean water to families who know that their children are drinking typhoid-infested water. But oh no. The decision was made instead by a niche group of very uncompassionate human beings. Otherwise they would do as I've said, to rebuild a building. What an absolute waste, and what an absolute opposition of everything that Jesus Christ taught. And how horrendous that the message to the world is clear to other religions here. What Christianity is about is not the teachings of Yeshua. Those who are doing it for historical reasons, believe what you want, that's fine. I'm addressing the religious side of things. But for historical reasons too, it's stupid, it's over, it's fell down. Get over it. It's gone. It's gone. There are people suffering, there are children suffering, and if they were in the square of that cathedral, you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't. If someone brought you all of the people whose lives will be for the rest of their lives comfortable, without hunger, without sickness, without suffering, in front of that cathedral, and said to the people, those children there can live happy or sad, or you can have a cathedral. That's the choice we have. What do you think people would choose to do? They would choose the happiness of the children. But society is trying to push people to subconsciously value culture, it seems, over human life. And in doing that, well, we all know what happened in World War II, etc. It's no different. It's really no different. It's just done in a very closet fashion, ultimately. So, I'm opposed to the rebuilding of the cathedral for the reasons I've stated. And I think I can easily say that the church does not speak for Yeshua on this matter, because I know if I can see that, and he said it, and it's written that he said it, then he would say exactly the same thing that I'm saying right now. There's no way he would not. Otherwise, why did the Bible go to great lengths to tell us to share? Why did it go to great lengths to tell us that God doesn't dwell in temples made of hands? Why? Sad. The underlying thing is, this is almost a message to every single country, religion on the planet, for those who have some sort of level of consciousness and aren't dulled by money. That Christianity just died. If the Catholic Church and all the other churches get behind rebuilding that cathedral, Christianity is dead, and this symbolises it. Absolutely symbolises it, because they are going against Christ. They are antichrist if they rebuild that, because they choose to step over the innocent, and they choose to direct resources to a place which doesn't serve the purpose of helping humanity to be Christian. It does not. It doesn't. It's sickening, and it's sad, and it's heartbreaking to see. When you live where I live and you see what I see, to see resources doing that, it's just wrong on every single level. And the thing is, I think I'm not the only person, or persons, who might see this as a definitive sign that Christianity's morality, Christianity's core beliefs, has just died by many Christian sects saying, let's rebuild that cathedral. It literally is a sign that Christianity's dying. Sadly, what it's built on, the foundation of the morals of that man Jesus Christ, Yeshua Christ, have been abandoned. And over our neighbour, over culture, over the well-being of children, culture has been chosen. It's a dark day. When you think about it correctly, it's a dark day. And maybe there are some prophets out in the world, who knows? Because I know there was a very unusual video which represented the Antichrist, called I Goat 2, I think. Can't remember. I'll put the name in, and I'll put a clip in from there now, because there's a very unusual scene in there where a steeple falls, which looks like the Notre Dame steeple, and it falls on top of a crucifix. And if you hear the words I've just said and they resonate with you, and you look at that, then you might be able to say that perhaps there was someone prophetic behind the creation of that cartoon. Maybe that, or someone who satellite of the cathedral made it, which is another discussion for another video, I'm sure. I can hear the people singing to God with the joy in their hearts behind me. And yes, many a person has sung in joy in Notre Dame, I'm sure. But how many people can't sing today because they have no water, because they're dying, because they have no food? How many children can't smile? And how many children could smile if we were mature enough back in Europe to accept that the fire had took the building and it was gone, and that resources would be better placed into assisting either the children of our own country, which there are many suffering in France, or the children elsewhere in all the war-torn nations. Doesn't make sense, does it? And thus we see the rise of the Antichrist establishment taking a good grip on the planet. And it is Antichrist. If you can't afford money to end world hunger, but you can afford infinitely more money to fire infinite amounts of bombs at people, you better believe that the Antichrist is in charge. There's no other way to describe it. That's what an Antichrist is, that which is opposed to the teachings of Yeshua. God bless, guys.